Chapter 81. Home. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 81. Home. The monk raised his head and looked at the drones that filled the sky. Then, he smiled. The robe landed from the sky and covered his tall and sturdy body. He rolled his hands toward the ground, and pieces of equipment and props that were shining with various lights fell into his hands. Buddha is merciful. He chanted a Buddhist chant in a low voice, and his heart was filled with joy. With these things, his master would be delighted. Then, he turned his head to look at Hill, who was kneeling on the ground and had been completely converted into a devout monk. Foolish man. He picked up the monk's staff and the copper bowl. Let's go. Let's go. The beautiful dream of the Buddha needs your contribution. Hill stood up in a daze. Like a monk, he put his palms together. Yes, master. Then, he followed the monk named Fa. Step by step, both of them disappeared from the surveillance range of the drone. Zhang Hui looked at everything on the screen. He could not help but gulp, even though the commander-in-chief often told him that the world is very unpredictable. Ever since the recovery of the spiritual essence, all kinds of strange and weird things had been happening. He had indeed seen many strange things that ordinary people could not imagine in their lifetime. But today's change was still something he could not imagine. This master, he looked at Situ He and said, how did he cultivate? According to the information, he was born in 2821 of the Republic era more than 30 years ago. Now, he was only 30.3 years old. He became a monk at the age of 10. In other words, he had only cultivated for 23 years. 23 years, he was unknown. 23 years, he cultivated bitterly. 23 years, he did not ask for any resources from the Federal Empire or the blackguards. Now, he had become famous in one fell swoop. At that moment, Zhang Hui's cell phone rang. He took the phone up, looked at the number, and picked it up. What? Zen Master Jinghui passed away 5 years ago. Zhang Hui put down his cell phone with a strange expression. What's wrong? Situ He asked. The person who helped us contact people just called and said. Zhang Hui looked at the screen. Zen Master Fa's master, Jinghui, passed away 5 years ago. Is there something wrong? Situ He did not understand. Zen Master Jinghui died because of crime passional, Zhang Hui said with a strange expression. The one who killed the Zen Master was a prostitute. When Situ He heard that, his expression was strange too. A monk who was a drinker, money-minded, and had sex with could raise a virtuous monk. And it was a master who could suppress the werewolf duke of the land of Qin and convert an evil devil apostle. This was King. General Situ, Zhang Hui said, I remember that this year, the blackguards still have a few recommendation spots for the posthumous title. Yes, Situ He nodded. Add Zen Master Jinghui's name. Zhang Hui said. Situ He was stunned for a moment before he nodded, okay, I'll do it right away. Since ancient times, the Federal Empire had a tradition of posthumous titles for deceased virtuous monks and righteous people. However, honoring a monk of wine, women, avarice, and pride, the 4 cardinal vices. It didn't sound good. Therefore, they could only beautify his personality. The strong-built monk led the transformed Hill through the barrier between reality and dreams. Finally, he stopped in front of the door. Foolish man. Go in. The monk said. Hill put his palms together and bowed to the monk. Master, this disciple will leave now. The monk nodded with a compassionate look on his face. Then, he looked at Hill and stepping into the door. When Hill walked in, he found himself in a world made of steel and machinery. Huge turrets were floating in the air. Huge mechanical guards were patrolling in the air. Huge gears appeared in the sky. Crack, crack, crack. Goodness be true. Hill put his palms together. Bodhisattva Gatling of Nanwu. Praise the future Buddha of steam and steel. Then, a miraculous machine descended from the sky and covered him. A few mechanical arms stretched out from all directions. They installed parts into his body and melted pieces of steel into his flesh. He was originally a headless undead being, an apostle of hell. Therefore, his transformation potential was extremely strong. An hour later, a new mechanical guardian with dual arms and multiple Gatling cannons was completed. It walked out of the mechanical factory that had transformed it. Then, it raised its two arms and aimed them at the sky. Bang, bang, bang. The Gatling cannons continued to fire. Amitba. The robotic voice sounded cold. A command was sent to its modified electronic brain. It understood. The great Bodhisattva Gatling needed it to guard a steel altar for him. Thus, it walked towards a whirlpool and finally disappeared in it. It would become a guard that would guard that altar for eternity. Until, the great mercy of the Bodhisattva Gatling came to the world. Elizabeth took thousands of refugees, gathering in front of the steel altar day and night. They chanted the mechanical gospel of great praise. Their faith devoutly dedicated to the great spirit of all machines, the great mercy of the Bodhisattva Gatling, the future Buddha of steam and steel. Because they had already witnessed a miracle, they had also witnessed the compassion of the Bodhisattva Gatling and the greatness of the spirit of all machines. Ring the bell once, push the lever, as they chanted, again and again, the steel altar melted day by day. Finally, under everyone's annotation, it slowly became a real altar. A whirlpool appeared in the center of the steel and machinery. Molten steel flowed in it like water. The sound of the truth of machinery came from it. An enormous steel palm stretched out from it and grabbed the steel floor at the edge of the whirlpool. Then, its head made of machinery and steel popped out from the whirlpool. Then, its enormous body, which was 6 to 7 meters tall. It crawled out from the vortex of the altar. Its two steel arms began to transform, finally turning into the great Bodhisattva Gatling's sacred artifact, the Uefa Gatling cannon. It looked coldly at the world. The sun above its head did not have much temperature. It was slowly eroded by a terrifying evil Diablo. This world was sad and pitiful. However, it no longer had any emotions and would not have any sentimental feelings. It walked mechanically in front of Elizabeth, who was in front of the crowd, and its steel-cast feet knelt. Elizabeth looked at it, the servant of Bodhisattva Gatling. She knew that it was a Buddha soldier sent by Bodhisattva. It was the guardian of the mechanical temple and the steel altar for her. Hence, she took out the mechanical gospel book and recited the gospel to it. The Tao of steel is materialistic, flesh and blood are weak, but steel is eternal. Amen. After listening to the Mass, the enormous mechanical guardian stood up and walked to a corner of the altar. It fused its body into it, leaving only half of the mechanical head outside. It looked like a giant that was sleeping inside the altar. From now on, it would only wake up when a powerful foreign enemy attacked. And its mission here was quite simple. To liberate the Bodhisattva's voters, let the Bhikkhuni of steel hunt for more evil gods, children and minions for the merciful Bodhisattva Gatling, and gain more believers. To prepare for the eternal ruler to finally descend into this world. He would return. He would be destined to wake up. Chapter 82. 2 cards. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 82. 2 cards. Ling Pingan raised his head as he yawned and looked at the clock. It was already 7 o'clock in the evening. The hero of Canyon is just so. He looked at the enemy crystal that had exploded on the screen of his phone and smiled smugly. His account had been unblocked last night. However, he had been busy typing yesterday and had forgotten about this. Today, he was naturally engrossed in the Battle of the Canyon. Not to mention, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Gaming was just the same theory. The Battle of the Canyon had once again become fun for Ling Pingan. After playing for the whole day, he had won at least 20 games but only lost 3 games. This account had forcefully ranked first in the national server. Putting down his phone, the bookshop owner, who paid a lot of attention to his health, began to get up and stretch his muscles. Then, he sat down, ordered takeout, and turned on the television. The evening news was reported on the television. Today, the Navy fleet of our country in the Kingdom of Malin and the Navy of the Kingdom of Malin have held their annual military exercises. The armies of the two countries have jointly conducted several subjects, including naval artillery bombardment, maritime rescue, personnel transportation, and missile drills. The King of Marlin and the First Minister of the Marlin Cabinet have watched this exercise together, and they have highly appraised the quality of the officers and soldiers participating in the exercise. On the television screen, the joint operations of the Navy destroyers and frigates appeared, as well as the joint drills of the Marines and armored forces. Ling Pingan watched the news in a daze. Because 14 years ago, his parents had stepped onto the land of Kunlun province from the Marlin Naval Base. He turned around and looked at the family photo in the cupboard. The photo in the photo frame was a little blurry due to improper maintenance. Ling Pingan looked at it and sighed. He walked over, took down the photo frame, and held it in his hand. The photo was blurry that he could no longer see the appearance of the family of 3. He gently stroked the last image of his parents in the world. His hand touched something behind the photo frame. He curiously took it out and found that it was a small card. There were words written on the card. He took the card and walked to the counter. After looking at it, he frowned. Strange. Why would someone write a historical story on this card? On the card, there was a story written with a pen. That was a story that many people had read when they were in school. During the Warring States period, the state of Qin was powerful. South Korea was afraid that the state of Qin would attack them. Therefore, the water conservancy expert, the state of Zheng, went to the state of Qin to carry out the plan of tiring the state of Qin in the name of building a water conservancy channel. He used the water conservancy project to delay the state of Qin's attack on South Korea. Later, when the matter was exposed, the state of Zheng said to the king of Qin, "At first, I was acting in order to cause dissension, but when the canal is completed it will surely be a benefit to Qin. I have been working for the South Korean for years, and it was for Qin's contribution to the world." The king of Qin was incredibly pleased, so he ordered the state of Zheng to continue to build the canal. After the canal was completed, the king of Qin conquered the 6 states. He looked at the card, which was copied almost everything from historical materials. Ling Pingan scratched his head and turned the card over. He found that there was a paragraph on the back: "How would a person who drinks dove poison to quench his thirst, not knowing the strength of the dove poison? Without it, one would die if they didn't drink it, and one could linger for a moment if they drank it." So, Ling Pingan thought, my parents once copied this. Thinking of this, he put the card back. When he put the photo frame back, Ling Pingan realized that there seemed to be a thin book of a family tree behind where the photo frame was placed. He immediately took it down out of curiosity. After all, a family tree was the thing that most affected the hearts of the people in the country. That was because a family tree was something that could tell every single person in the federal who they were and where they came from. Ling Pingan took down the thin book of a family tree and realized that it was covered in dust. He blew on the dust and saw the name of the family tree. The family tree of the Ling clan of Jingchu. So, Ling Pingan scratched his head. My ancestor's surname is Ling. This is a rare surname. He flipped open the family tree and looked at the words on it. He finally knew that his ancestral home was in Jingchu. 200 years ago, they moved to Guangnan. When his ancestors were in Jingchu, they were the famous local family, who worshipped God and ghosts. They worshipped the youth god for generations. Ling Pingan knew some about the youth god. The infant protector god described in the poet, 9 Songs, of the famous poet Chu Yuan, was a god that Jingchu was worshipped during the spring and autumn and the Warring States periods. Looking at the words on the family tree, Ling Pingan knew that his family had been passing the tradition down from generation to generation. Every male of every generation of the Ling family existed as a god devotee who served the youth god. It was not until 200 years ago, for some unknown reason, that the entire family moved away from their hometown of Jingchu and came to Guangnan to live and work in peace. Since then, the Ling clan had changed to the Ling family. After reading the family tree, Ling Pingan smiled. I didn't expect my ancestor to be a god believer. As a firm materialist, Ling Pingan was not interested in those feudal superstitions. He would use them as material only when writing novels. Just as he was about to put the family tree back, a small card suddenly fell out from the pages of the family tree. Ling Pingan picked it up and looked at it. It was a passage from the Tao Te Ching, Tao's teaching. The skillful masters of the Tao in old times, he read the words on it. With a subtle and exquisite penetration, comprehended its mysteries, and were deep, so as to elude men's knowledge. It's the 15th chapter of the Tao Te Ching. He laughed. As a web writer, how could he not read the Tao Te Ching? Therefore, he knew that the 15th chapter of the Tao Te Ching was about the saint's situation that Lao Tzu described. In Lao Tzu's description, the so-called saints were a kind of existence that others could not understand or recognize. They were nameless and shapeless, indescribable. They were distant and profound, with infinite wisdom. Outsiders cannot perceive the existence of the saint, but they can perceive a great way of the saint subtly. Outsiders would not understand the movements of the saint. Outsiders would not understand the actions of the saint. In short, it is a very pretentious, elegant, and refined high-dimensional existence. It is above all things, representing the ultimate truth and rules of the universe. Human beings needed to learn and follow their path and wisdom. In the end, it was new and hidden. That was also the theme of this article. Ling Pingan chuckled. I didn't expect one of my ancestors to like reading the Tao Te Ching. This must be the Tao Te Ching he copied. As he said this, he carefully put the card into the family tree book and put it back where it was, and then closed the window. But he did not know, nor could he see. From the moment he saw the first card, the kitten, Batet had already stood up. And around him, there were pairs of evil eyes that surrounded him. One by one, indescribable monsters looked at him nervously. It was obvious that these things were afraid, nervous, and uneasy. Finally, when Ling Pingan put the family tree book back, they scattered away in all directions as if they were relieved. On the glass door of the bookstore, a huge eye opening. It mercilessly glanced at those monsters. Then, punishment came. In the eye, strange dot-shaped whips were released. These whips rolled up those terrifying and indescribable monsters and threw them around. Bam! 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 Mournful howls lingered in the bookstore. The entire world shook upon their wails. The kitten, Batet, trembled and curled her body. She leaned against the computer and carefully laid down. Chapter 83. The Crown Prince of the Milky Way. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 83. The Crown Prince of the Milky Way. The wind blew against the willow trees in the Xian garden. Rustle. Willow trees rustled. Two burly panda guards protected their lord as they walked in a panic. Behind them, the nimble rat-men assassins had already quickly caught up. The buildings in the distance were burning. The assassins were getting closer and closer. The two panda-men guards looked at each other. They knew that the dirty rat-men would definitely catch up to them. Your Highness. The two panda-men guards looked at their lord and knelt down. Please leave quickly. Go to Chang'an. I will hold back the assassins with my life. With that, the two panda-men pushed the seemingly frightened youth into the distance of the forest. The two of them, with their backs against each other, drew their heavy swords. One rat man after another came from all directions with scarlet eyes. Rats. The panda man raised his heavy sword. Come. Unless you step over our corpses. Otherwise, don't even think about taking a step forward. Since this is your wish, a rat man with a sharp poisonous blade in his claws walked out of the darkness. Then we'll grant you your wish. Lu Chi stumbled out of the forest. He looked back at the willow forest. The sound of fierce fighting could be heard from there. His loyal guards were using their lives to buy him time and opportunity to escape. If I can return to Chang'an, he swore in his heart, I will personally lead an army to destroy you filthy chaos minions. However, he was actually clear in his heart. Those rat people were assassins who worked for money. The one who hired them might be his respected uncle. It might also be one of the kings in the south. It might also be the goblin Chanyu who was eyeing the Xinghan dynasty outside the Great Wall Fortress. If it was 200 years ago, he thought as he ran, even if the wicked and lecherous ones descended personally, how could they enter Chang'an? 200 years ago, the great ancestral dragon had reigned over the world. His supreme divine might suppressed everyone in the world. His terracotta army and bronze legions looked down on everyone. At that time, chaos minions, as well as chaos itself, were trembling. This was because the ancestral dragon had not only built a magnificent defensive system that protected the entire east, which was dozens of miles high. At the foot of the Great Wall, there were 40 terracotta army corps and 7 elite bronze legions. The goblins, ogres, and centaurs who believed in chaos did not even dare to approach the prosperous world inside the Great Wall. They did not even dare to approach it. At that time, the lackeys of the perverts were only fit to be the great health care for the subjects of the ancestral dragon. The treacherous believers were eunuchs in the imperial palace, carefully serving the ancestral dragon and his descendants. However, one day, a meteorite fell from the sky. The ancestral dragon saw the meteorite and disappeared. The entire empire fell into chaos. The followers of Gu Qi, Zhao Gao, seized the opportunity to seize power and wreak havoc in the country. BVEC with the disappearance of the ancestral dragon, his terracotta army and the bronze battle group exhausted their energy and parts one after another and went into hibernation. Then, there was a great earthquake that shook the world. Along with the huge earthquake that affected the entire world. Many cracks appeared on the Great Wall of Fufu built by the ancestral dragon. Ogres, centaurs, goblins, when the ancestral dragon was around, the chaos minions that did not even dare to go south invaded one after another. In the end, the empire built by the ancestral dragon collapsed amid internal and external troubles. Lu Zhu's ancestor was once a tall man under the rule of the ancestral dragon. He had merged with the bloodline of the Black Dragon Emperor and built a new empire, called Hafu Star Han. The outside world, especially the Chaos Minions in the north, called it the Milky Way Empire. However, the new Star Han dynasty was not the ancestral dragon's immortal Qin Empire. It could not create thousands of terracotta soldiers like the ancestral dragon, nor could it have those unbelievably powerful bronze legions. It could only rely on the flesh and blood of brave warriors to barely defend its country and people. It even had to sign a humiliating treaty with the minions of chaos. It had to give women and gold, silk, jade, and jewelry in exchange for temporary peace. This was something Lu Zhu could not accept. Therefore, he had made it clear long ago that his position, Fufu, and chaos, were irreconcilable. I can go if you want to. He vowed to take revenge. He vowed to change everything and return the situation to the era of the ancestral dragon. Naturally, this attracted countless hateful gazes. Not only from the outside, but also from the officials and dukes who were scared out of their wits by chaos. Thinking of this, the young crown prince of the Xinghan dynasty quickened his pace. However, soon, the pursuers behind him arrived. Obviously, the two loyal panda guards had died heroically. Lu Qi turned around and saw countless scarlet eyes surrounding him from all directions. Is the heavens going to kill me? He thought. Those rat men from the west were the most outstanding assassins and killers of the Xinghan dynasty. Lu Qi knew very well that once they found him, he would definitely die. At this moment, Lu Qi saw a thick fog appear on the mountain road ahead. The fog quickly spread. He did not have time to think and quickly ran towards the thick fog. That might be the only place he could escape to. Just as he ran into the fog, the vanguard of the rat men jumped down from the tree crowns. Your Royal Highness the Crown Prince, the future temple guardian and protector of the Milky Way Empire. You don't have to hide anymore. A young rat man with a mask on his head shouted into the fog, you can't escape. The Isin clan has no record of failure in the past 200 years. But there was no reply in the thick fog. The rat man hesitated for a moment and tied a rope around his waist. Then, he handed the other end of the rope to a companion and strode into the thick fog. This was a necessary precaution. This was because there were too many mysteries and miracles in this land. This was especially so since this place was located in the core region of this country. There were many relics from the previous era left behind, and it was the arrangement of the ancestral dragon, who had once reigned over the world and suppressed everything. 50 years ago, a main force of the Maggot Lord had recklessly barged into the arrangement left behind by the ancestral dragon and was completely slaughtered by the temple guards who had suddenly come to life. Perhaps there was some secret hidden in the thick fog. The young rat man stepped into the thick fog under the watchful eyes of his companions. A second later, his companion, who was pulling the rope tied to his waist, realized that something was wrong. He hurriedly pulled the rope back. He only pulled back a piece of rat skin that was only left with its fur, and all its flesh and bones were missing. All the rat people took a deep breath. Chapter 84. Variant characters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 84. Variant characters. Ling Pingan held the freshly brewed tea in his hands as he sat at the counter and sighed. That night, he had overturned all the results of his efforts on the previous night. The reason was quite simple. He read the manuscript once and felt that it was awkward. So, he knew that he would definitely fail. He looked at the document that had been deleted again on the screen and sighed. Writing a new book gives me a headache. If I had known, I wouldn't have written the ending for the previous book. This way, he could continue working by fits and starts while spending his day happily. He didn't need to spare some time every day to write the beginning of the novel, like what he was doing. He looked up at the clock on the wall. It was already 11 o'clock. Ling Pingan stood up and walked to the door of the shop. He was about to close the door and head upstairs to sleep. Then he saw a figure that seemed to be approaching him in the distance in the fog. So, he stopped. A customer or a passer-by. He was curious. Coming to think of it, the customer that pledged his wristwatch a few days ago had not returned to get his watch back. Probably he was lost in the game of Stellaris, and was trying to get gold. Ling Pingan thought. Stellaris was famous in the entire Federal Empire's gaming world for the addiction it caused. It was quite common to raid the dungeon, dozens to hundreds of times just for a rare piece of equipment. It was also necessary to participate in large-scale team dungeon activities organized by the Union on time, exactly like going to work, in order to obtain so-called team points to buy pieces of equipment that were found only in team dungeons. That was why Ling Pingan did not play the game. It was too scary. Ling Pingan thought of the two guests from last night again. They were both nice people. Upright gentlemen. Especially that old man. Ling Pingan admired him very much. Look at him, how trustworthy. The ancient Lu Xiaohui was just so in front of him. After waiting for a while, Ling Pingan saw a person walking over from the distant thick fog. It was a young man wearing a set of exquisite vintage clothing. As an author of web novels, Ling Pingan recognized it at a glance. It seemed to be the black silk woven material from the Han Dynasty. There was a standard Han Dynasty red ribbon tied around his waist, and he wore a crown that seemed to be of jade. Just looking at it, Ling Pingan's eyes lit up. Fat sheep. Big fat sheep. He was eager to give him a try and rubbed his palms. Everyone knew that the Han costume was a hobby that cost a lot of money. Not to mention the accessories, any Han costume on the market could easily cost thousands. If one were particular about it, it would cost thousands or even tens of thousands. As he got closer and closer, Ling Pingan was overwhelmed with excitement. That was because the clothes that this young man was wearing, no matter from which aspect, were all custom-made after going through a strict examination. Custom-made clothes meant that they were expensive. The strict examination showed that he was very particular. That was a customer that he rarely met, and also a very generous customer. Ling Pingan had heard that some bookshop had sold an original copy to a customer, who had a passion for ancient culture and traditions. What a guy, he had earned over 10,000 yuan in one go. Over 10,000 yuan. It was a huge income after a long time. Of course, Ling Pingan's shop didn't have any ancient books of that value. But there were several sets of popular books that were printed more than 100 years ago. One of them was even worth 1,000 yuan. If he could sell it. Ling Pingan was about to drool. Lu Ji looked ahead at the flickering light source in the depths of the fog. He hesitated. Because he saw a shadow under the light. Without a doubt, it was a person. Or a humanoid monster. What is this place? He looked around at the thick fog. This thick fog gave him the feeling that it was an independent world. It also seemed to be a divine kingdom created by some Diablos of chaos. Since the kingdom of Xinghan was founded, it had dealt with many Diablos of chaos and their claws and servants. In the palace, there was even a tradition of using the followers of Tsench. The kingdom of Xinghan was both wary and friendly towards the evil god of chaos and their claws. Just like those rat-men who assassinated him were refugees that his grandfather had taken in. These people who called themselves the followers of the horned rat had come out from underground. At that time, the kingdom of Xinghan was facing a serious threat from the goblin, Chanyu from the northern grassland. The ogre army under him had even threatened the safety of Chang'an. In the end, it was thanks to the arrangement left by the ancestral dragon and with the deterrence of 3 Kirin worshipped by the royal family, that the invasion was forced back. Therefore, even though they knew that those dirty rats would become a disaster sooner or later, they had to drink poison to quench their thirst and use them to assassinate the officer and noble of the goblin, Chanyu, to delay the advance of the army. So, I am facing a Diablo. He looked at the figure under the light and thought, it is very likely to be a new Diablo. However, when did a new Diablo appear in the void? He thought. However, since he had already stepped into someone else's territory, if he did not go over and see his thoughts and intentions, Lu Ji knew that he would never be able to walk out of this fog. So, he gathered his courage and slowly approached. When he approached, the thick fog gradually dispersed. A building that seemed to make him extremely confused appeared in front of him. It was a building that was completely different from the architecture of the kingdom of Xinghan. It was made of red bricks of a certain material, and its surface had some stones that were stuck to it. A plaque of an unknown material hung at the door. Surprisingly, Lu Ji could recognize the word written on it. This was because there was a connection between it and the usurp writing in clerical script of the kingdom of Xinghan. Qiyuan Bookstore. Lu Qi frowned. He had received a formal and strict royal education since he was a child, so he quickly realized something was wrong. Or rather, it's the bookstore of origins. There were many variant characters in the kingdom of Xinghan. That was especially used in the upper echelons. They loved to do this kind of thing. Did I write the wrong character? No. That was a variant character. Do you understand? On the other hand, within the red bricks, stone slabs, and plaques, Lu Ji's had an instinct that there were countless monsters entrenched within them. They lowered their ferocious tentacles. They opened their terrifying mouthparts. Under the cracks of the walls and plaques, the indescribable monsters emitted low, incomprehensible sounds. It seemed to be a warning, or perhaps it was to put a fear of them in him. Under the plaque, a person, who was wearing clothes of an unknown material and seemed to be slightly taller than him, was already standing there. To be more precise, it should be him. Lu Ji looked at him, who was under a certain light source. The head that was shrouded in a fog was like an abyss that could not be looked at directly. At this moment, he looked over. He looked at Lu Ji. In the head that was covered by the mist, 2 flames rose from what seemed to be the eye sockets. Lu Ji looked at him, approaching. Then, he cupped his hands and said to Lu Ji with a very traditional etiquette of Kingdom of Xinghan, "Welcome to my humble store, dear customer." His voice was calm and powerful. It was as if he had great power. When he spoke, the whole world fell silent. Chapter 85. Ling Ping En's Personal Customs Service. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 85. Ling Ping En's Personal Customs Service. As a web novelist who had encountered failure all year round, Ling Pingan cherished every reader. That was because they were the people he depends upon for his livelihood. Similarly, as a bookstore owner who had a mild business, he valued every customer. Therefore, he had already prepared countless drafts. He had already prepared personal custom services for all kinds of customers. To put it simply, he spoke based on the customer's personality and interest. Everything he did was for the customers to be satisfied, and in the end, he took money out of their pockets. Therefore, when he saw this customer was dressed and styled according to ancient traditions, Ling Pingan immediately used the etiquette he had learned when he was a child. He cupped his hands and bowed. "Welcome to my humble store, dear customer." Then, he cupped his hands and made an inviting gesture. Lu Ji looked at the figure in front of him. In his head made of fog, the fire in his eyes was burning hot. It seemed to say, "Another new sacrifice." Lu Ji gulped and looked behind him. There seemed to be a door made of some colorless glass. When the ancestral dragon was around, the government had produced a large number of this type of glass door. It was usually a by-product produced by the Terracotta Army. Even with the disappearance of the ancestral dragon, a large number of the government's craftsmanship was losing these days. The technology of making such glasses was still passed down. Outside Chang'an, several workshops specialized in making this kind of glass and selling it to the nobles and wealthy merchants in the city. However, the furnishings behind the door made Lu Ji tremble with fear. In the corner of a wooden counter, a kitten was lying on its stomach. The psionic power wrapped around its body fully demonstrated its strength. Lu Ji compared and found that even the 3 Kirans worshipped in the temple of the Kingdom of Xinghan were not as powerful as the psionic power in this kitten. Beside the kitten that laid on its tummy, there was something unknown made by the Mo family. By the side of that thing, the sheep-headed human-faced Tao Tai opened its eyes. The shadows of the monsters reflected on the ground. In the distance, an unimaginable terrifying abyss stood on the other side. A thick liquid was slowly flowing at its edges. Pairs of evil eyes, which were so terrifying to Lu Qi, opened and closed one after another. "Please." The monster in front of him extended his hand and made an invitation. His hand looked very thin, and the skin on his arm was so white that it was even whiter than the skin of the concubines in the royal palace. Lu Ji took a deep breath and nodded without any other choice. Then, he gathered his courage and asked the monster, "Sir, do you sell books here?" He raised his head and looked at the plaque, which was written in simplified writing or deliberately written in such a manner. He saw countless eyes staring straight at him from the plaque as if they were very dissatisfied with his question. "Yes." The monster said softly, "I sell books here." I sell all kinds of books. As long as the customer wants it, I have it here. If it doesn't work, the store will still accept a booking service." As he said that, he led Lu Ji into his store. Lu Ji did not dare enter. Because, he could feel that something had slipped into the depths of the fog from the plaque. Hence, he knew that he could not submit to his pressure after first turning down his request. If that were the case, the master would be angry. If the master was angry, how could the servants dare to slack off? When had his aunt's servants not killed dozens of ignorant people? As soon as he entered the shop, Lu Ji felt the layers of pressure coming from all directions. The blood of the black dragon in his body became extremely quiet in front of these pressures. And there was only one possibility for this situation. That was, the black dragon bloodline had encountered something far powerful than him. In other words, in this terrifying bookstore, countless monsters were more terrifying than his adult bloodline. The monster was strolling in the bookstore. He brought Lu Ji to a place that seemed to be a place for guests. Then, he picked up a cup made of an unknown material and placed a few tea leaves in it as he walked to a machine that seemed to be a creation of the Mo family, pressing a button, causing hot water to flow out. Then, he took the cup of tea to Lu Ji and handed it over. "Guest, please drink the tea." Lu Ji took the tea in a daze. The golden tea leaves floated in the cup. The dense spirit aura rose like an immortal mist. Just by smelling it, Lu Ji knew the value of this cup of tea. Legend had it that the ancestral dragon once gathered the 7 most powerful alchemists and the 3 legendary elites with the most powerful yin-yang to gather spiritual herbs and divine herbs to refine a furnace of immortal pills. When mortals consume it, they would immediately be reborn and possess the potential to cultivate. When cultivators consume it, it would also have the miraculous effect of increasing their cultivation and prolonging their lives. However, the cup of tea in his hand probably already had 60% of the effect of the cauldron of immortal pills that the ancestral dragon had refined with the power of the world back then. That shocked Lu Ji and made him extremely nervous. He hid in this dense fog in order to escape. The owner of the bookstore, the monster in the fog, not only didn't blame him for stepping in rashly. Instead, he served him a cup of such a magical tea. So, what did he want? Lu Ji remembered that his mother had told him when he was young that there was a price to pay for anything. So, in order to make him the crown prince, he took the initiative to a joint family with his father's sister. He made his elder cousin, who was 6 or 7 years older than him, his crown prince consort. At that time, he was only 4 years old. But he was smart enough to say that if he could take elder cousin, Jiao as his wife, he would mount a house full of gold for her. Look, even he, the prince of the kingdom of Xinghan, the most favored child of his father, had to pay such a price to become the crown prince. Now, the fog had protected him. The monster let him in and gave him a cup of divine tea. What did he want? To sell books to him. It was not that simple. However, Lu Ji did not dare to ask directly. So, he thought for a moment and said, "Can you let me see your collection of books?" The monster listened, and laughter came from the depths of the fog. He was still calm and relaxed. "Dear customer, please wait a moment." As he said that, he turned around and walked toward the silent abyss. His footsteps stepped on the floor. Lu Ji could feel that all the monsters in the bookstore were avoiding him, but they were also guarding it. Just like the Panda.Men guards, who swore to protect him in the Xixian garden. So, Lu Ji thought, I have come to the lair of a terrifying Diablo. The kingdom of Xinghan had done research and knowledge on the Diablos in the chaos. Most of these researches and knowledge came from the various materials excavated from the ruins of the immortal Qin Empire. In those materials, there was a common consensus among the wise men of the immortal Qin Empire. The Diablo of Chaos were monsters born from the projection of human spirits and desires in the void. Therefore, Slaanesh, Tsench, Korn, and Nurgle. They corresponded respectively to desire, conspiracy, hatred, and disease. So, what was he corresponded to? Lu Ji did not know but felt chills in his spine. Chapter 86. The Guide of Making the Terracotta Army of the Immortal Qin Empire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 86. The Guide of Making the Terracotta Army of the Immortal Qin Empire. Ling Pingan walked between the bookshelves. His eyes wandered from book to book. He thought for a long time and finally decided. He pulled out a book from the bookshelf. A collection of famous objects in Qin and Han dynasties, published by the Federal Empire Press in 2780 Gongha era, had been published almost 60 years ago. The book was one of the few books in Ling Pingan's bookshop that still used the old-fashioned vertical and traditional writing style. Although it was an ancient book, its practical value was extremely high. Ling Pingan had written history literature a while ago by using it as a reference. In this book, there were many studies and introductions of the Qin and Han dynasties' clothing, artifacts, weapons, and tools, explained by the Federal Empire. The key was that it had pictures and words. That customer might like this book. Ling Pingan thought. After all, the examiners would always love these books that were full of the real stuff. Besides, the vertical arrangement of the writings in this book should be able to satisfy this customer's psychological needs, even though it was already the 1940s of the 28th century of the Gongha era. On the land of Qin, they were also clamoring that we were about to enter the new century. However, the nostalgic and old-fashioned people were still like a school of silver carps. Among these people, some liked to be unconventional. They loved to read the traditional form words in vertical lines and always felt that the simplified form words in horizontal lines were an insult to them. In fact, they were doing it to show off. Therefore, they always had to pay the price for their stupidity and scammed by others. There. Ling Pingan turned around and looked at the young man who was wearing Han attire. Even his sitting posture was like that of the Han people. He smiled. Man, in any case, you might be scammed by others. I can at least sell you real goods here. So, he took the book and walked back. Lu Ji was sitting on a bench that seemed to be made of some leather. He was not quite used to it. However, he had to adapt to his identity as the Crown Prince of Xinghan Kingdom, and he had to maintain a perfect sitting posture. A king would not let his crown fall even he dies. Even in the lair of the Diablo, he was determined not to lose his ritual and etiquette. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of footsteps lingered in his ears. Meow. The kitten, which had been lying in the corner of the counter, jumped to the ground and purred intimately. Then, it was picked up by the owner of the bookstore. Then, Lu Ji saw the owner of the bookstore walk to him with a book that was emitting strong dragon power. Dear customer, please take a look, he said, this is a book that records many ancient secrets and research. Lu Ji took the book from the owner. When his hand touched the pages of the book, the black dragon bloodline in his body began to boil. That made his body temperature start to rise, making his pupils fill with blood. He lowered his head and looked at the cover of the book. The Guide of Making the Terracotta Army of the Immortal Qin Empire. That was the name of the book. Lu Ji gulped. Then he looked at the inscription on the lower left corner. A golden dragon shadow was engraved on it. That was the personal seal of the missing ancestral dragon. So, this was the personal handwriting of the ancestral dragon. As the crown prince who grew up in the stories and legends of the ancestral dragon, Lu Ji worshipped the great existence, who had suppressed the world 200 years ago. He beat up Slaanesh with his fists, kicked Sench with his feet, and even claimed to be a loving father of all nations. He was the devotion of all. So, when he saw the book's title and the writing style, his hand tightly gripped the book. But he quickly realized that he would have to pay the price to get it. Sir. As the Crown Prince of Xinghan Kingdom, Lu Ji was taught very well since he was young. Moreover, after witnessing his eldest brother's death after being annihilated, Lu Ji had learned to hide his emotions. He tried his best to calm himself before raising his head to look at the monster. It was the owner of the bookstore, the terrifying Diablo. "I wonder what price you would need me to pay to sell this book to me." He laughed. The laughter came out from the fog around his head as if he was a little pleased and proud. The fire in his eyes rose with the laughter. He said, 218 yuan, thank you. He walked to the wooden counter, took out 2 signs from what seemed to be a drawer, and said to Lu Ji, "Of course, you can also choose to pay by scanning the code." Lu Ji looked over and only saw 2 horrible and evil things. One of them was covered in blood and tears as if countless souls were wailing in it. And the other was a whirlpool that was rotating eternally and slowly. So, Lu Ji thought, I have to pay him with soul or blood. That was what a Diablo would do. But 218 yuan. He accepts some currency too. Thinking of this, Lu Ji reached out to his belt and took out a brocade pouch. Opening the pouch filled with shiny coins. They were the most important strategic resource of the Xinghan kingdom, half a tael of immortal qin. Only the ancestral dragon era could produce large amounts of sacred coins. They were the most important resource for the Great Wall Fortress built by the ancestral dragon. Currently, the entire Xinghan kingdom could produce only thousands of coins a year with the strength of the entire country. It was only enough to maintain the daily operation of the Great Wall Fortress. As it was too difficult to produce, the Xinghan kingdom had no choice but to settle for the second best. They could produce 8 baht and 3 baht of low quality coins in large amounts. However, the price was that once these inferior coins were used, the system of the Great Wall Fortress would gradually slow down and might even collapse. Now, for the book written by the ancestral dragon in his hand, Lu Ji had no choice but to put in a lot of money. Lu Ji held the bag of coins and looked at the monster, the owner of the bookstore, and asked, "I wonder if you will accept the payment with these half-taels." Ling Pingan looked at the young customer, taking out a silk vintage coin pouch. Then, he poured out the brand new ancient coins in front of him. "I wonder if you will accept the payment with these half-taels." Ling Pingan listened to the young customer and frowned slightly. Half-tael coins. Half a tael from the Qin dynasty. Wasn't that a cultural relic? They should be handed over to the country. He walked forward, picked up one, and looked at it, then shook his head with a laugh. "Dear customer, the craftsmanship isn't up to standard." Although he wasn't a professional antique examiner, he knew that the half-tael from the Qin dynasty was forged from bronze. And the ancient coins in his hands were only similar. Looking at the color and the surface of the coins, they were too new. It looked like they had been made less than a month ago. So, the silly kid was probably scammed by someone. Just as he was about to speak, Ling Pingan saw that the young customer had lowered his head. His face was blushing, and he seemed to be very ashamed. The words that he was about to say were suddenly stuck in his throat. After all, how could a person who had paid the price of being foolish not to be angry if he were to talk about this matter again? So, where was the customer tricked by some unscrupulous, bad-hearted peddler? He might have even been tricked into bankruptcy. Thinking of this, Ling Pingan could not help but feel sympathetic. Of course, more importantly, he thought of the future. Don't you think that such a high-quality customer, a money machine, should be protected? Therefore, he smiled and picked out 20 to 30 called half-taels of coins from the young man's money bag. He estimated the loss that will cost him, then he gave the bag of money back. "All right, I will suffer some loss and sell this book to you." In any case, he probably would not be able to sell the book even he kept it in the bookstore. He might as well invest in the customer. Who knows, there might be a surprise in the future. Chapter 87. Return. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 87. Return Ling Pingan stood at the entrance and watched the young lover of ancient culture and traditions disappear into the thick fog. He sighed. Sigh. Loss. 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 Although he had sold a book this time, he had only received about 20 handicrafts that could only be in his collection. Other than that, he had also given out a flashlight worth 3 yuan. He somewhat missed the customers the night before. Walking back to the shop, Ling Pingan looked at the handicraft coins placed on the counter. He then silently put them into the drawer. After that, he comforted himself, maybe these coins will bring me good luck. As a materialist, although Ling Pingan didn't believe in any weird feudal superstitions. However, when it came to luck, he somewhat believed in it. After all, that was something that had been proven by experiments. For example, an old immortal who opened his mouth and professionally commented only 4 words, making countless esports players cried. Therefore, one had to believe in metaphysics. He held the cylinder-shaped Mo family creation in his hand. Under the illumination of its light source, Lu Ji walked through the fog. He clutched the book on his chest tightly. The notes that the ancestral dragon had jotted down itself, and it was an extremely precious illustration of how to make the terracotta army. Lu Ji's mood was both excited and perturbed. He was excited because he had obtained this precious knowledge. He had the opportunity to create a powerful terracotta army exactly like the ancestral dragon did, to protect his people and defend his country. He was nervous because he kept recalling what he saw and talked about in the monster's bookstore. Especially the process of the transaction. Dear customer, your craftsmanship is not up to standard, the seemingly teasing but also somewhat disdainful sentence kept echoing in his ears. Every word of this sentence was processed by him again and again. He might know the whereabouts of the ancestral dragon, Lu Ji thought to himself. He might even be inextricably linked to the disappearance of the ancestral dragon. If that was not the case, why would the ancestral dragon's notebook be in his possession? Therefore, his status was higher than the ancestral dragon's. And the ancestral dragon's status was not lower than the 4 evil gods of chaos. At least there were records that the ancestral dragon had fought with Slaanesh, and he had fought with Tsench across space. After that, the followers and claws of Slaanesh served the ancestral dragon. The followers of Tsench became eunuchs of the ancestral dragon imperial palace. In the end, the follower of Tsench, named Zhao Gao, completed the subversion of the ancestral dragon Xianqin Empire through a terrifying ceremony. That was how the Black Dragon Emperor bloodline rose and the Xinghan Kingdom was established. Then, Lu Ji thought, he protected me and sold me the ancestral dragon's notebook. What is his intention? The young crown prince of Xinghan Kingdom did not understand the meaning behind all these. However, he knew that a price had to be paid to obtain anything. Thinking of these things, Lu Ji stepped out of the fog. He looked forward and was stunned. In front of him was Chang'an. This great holy city. The fortress was built by Xiao He, a powerful legendary elite under the founder of the country, Emperor Taizu. When he walked over, he came to the Hengqin gate of Chang'an. The 2 stone Kailan guards, standing on both sides of the gate immediately reacted. Their eyes emitted red lights. Lu Ji took out his token calmly and showed at the direction of the red light emitting from the eyes of the 2 stone Kailan guards. Your Highness. The Kailan guards moved and knelt. Welcome the crown prince back to Chang'an. The heavy city gate slowly opened. The loyal Northern Army soldiers guarding the city gate came out to welcome him. The leader was a valiant general. I am Li Guang. Please forgive me for being late for the rescue. Lu Ji raised his head and looked at these loyal soldiers and ministers. He turned back and looked behind him. In the deep night, there was no trace of the fog. He touched the creation of the Mo family and the book in his arms. It was all very real. The shock in his heart was indescribable. From Xixian Garden to Chang'an, it was at least 150 miles, but the fog had sent him to the safe city of Chang, and in an instant. The Diablo in the mist had fully demonstrated his sincerity and strength. So, Lu Ji asked, what will he ask for in return? The few pieces of the half-tail coins of immortal Qin that he despised and reluctantly accepted. How could it be? But no matter what his ultimate goal was, it was a matter of the future. What Lu Ji wanted to do was to take revenge. For his loyal guards, for the people who died in the Sixian garden. The young crown prince of Xinghan Kingdom raised his hand. The rat-men of Asan are bold and reckless. They have no respect for the law, and they dared to assassinate me. Which general is willing to kill those villains for me? Your Highness. Li Guangduan, who was wearing a thick mythological warrior's heavy armor, answered the order, please hand this matter over to this humble subject. I am willing to make a military order to kill the rat-men of Aizen within 3 days. Lu Ji nodded. Thank you, General. Han Li jumped down from the tree crown. On the side of the road ahead, a stele was planted on the ground. The name of Linhai City was engraved on the stele. 2 rusted cars fell on the side of the asphalt road. She jumped over and landed on the roof of a small car, that had been corroded to the point where only the body of the car was left. With a gentle wave of the spirit blade in her hand, the small car instantly shattered into pieces. The monster that was hiding under the car screamed shrilly, and then its entire body shattered into pieces on the ground. Han Li landed and picked up a crystal that the monster had dropped. It's the 85th one. She spoke. The soul crystal was the most thing she had on her right now. There was a certain probability that crystals would appear on the bodies of these monsters and evil spirits. In the past, they had been used by humans as additives and fertilizers. They were used to make spirit blades or grow spirit plants. Cerulean spirit tea was grown with these crystals. But now, Han Li knew that it had many more uses. For example, it could be used to make medicine, or it could be directly consumed to strengthen the soul. But unfortunately, she was the only one who could do it in this world. Because this was a gift from the owner in the fog. After putting the crystal on her body, Han Li stood up and walked to Linhai City in strides. I will bring peace to this place. She said firmly. The sunlight fell on her body and reflected a voluptuous, enchanting, and mature shadow on the ground. He closed the shutter door and turned off the lights. As usual, Ling Pingan said good night to the kitten, Batet, and then took his cell phone and walked up the stairs. The sound of his footsteps gradually faded away. On the glass door, an eye opened. He scanned every corner of the bookstore, and everywhere he passed, it was strangely quiet. Finally, his gaze stopped in the drawer of the counter. There were 20 to 30 pieces of coins that shone with a colorful luster. The half-tail of immortal Qin was imitated by the Xinghan Kingdom. Coins forged by legendary elites with the power of creating fire from subjects' will. One was enough to maintain the operation of the huge and magnificent Great Wall Beacon Tower for a year. Finally, he slowly closed his eyes. In the bookstore, the hustle and bustle were back to normal as they were before. Chapter 88. Light of Righteousness. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 88. Light of Righteousness. Ling Pingan woke up after a good night's sleep. He searched on the bed and found his phone. When he unlocked the screen, it was already 7:30 in the morning. He got up and washed up briefly. Then, he remembered the little peach tree upstairs. So, he took a glass of water and walked up the stairs with it. When he reached the small house on the top floor, a plastic basin was placed in the corner of the door. Ling Pingan went over to take a look. The day before yesterday, there were only 2 small leaves that had emerged from the buds, but now they looked like saplings. Awesome! Ling Pingan was delighted. So, he carefully poured some water on it. Then, he moved the plastic basin to the edge of the door, so that it could bask in the sun, but it didn't have to endure the scorching sun in the noon and afternoon. When he turned around and walked down the stairs, the little peach sapling in the plastic basin let out a giggle suddenly. A breeze came from somewhere. The little sapling immediately quieted down. So, it stretched out its tender leaves like a solar sail, directly reaching out to the open space outside the door, enjoying the nourishment of the sun. Just as he walked down the stairs and opened the door of the shop, Ling Pingan saw Aunt Wang's niece standing at the door of his shop. She was holding brand-new bags of clothes in her hands. "I'm sorry." The little girl lowered her head in shame. "Young Master Ling, the clothes you sent to wash were accidentally damaged because of me." She handed the bags in her hands to Ling Pingan. "I bought these according to your brand." She nervously bowed deeply. Her little face blushed. "Please accept it." Ling Pingan was slightly stunned when he heard that and subconsciously took it. Then, he immediately reacted. The clothes that he sent to the laundry were accidentally damaged by this little girl. Then, the little girl paid for the same new clothes to compensate him. Ling Pingan felt as if the light of righteousness was shining on him. A bunch of self-media on the internet kept saying things like, "The quality of the people of the Federal is getting lower and lower, the traditional values are almost gone, the generation that is falling," and so on. Now, it all seemed to be bullshit. Look. This little girl was only 20 years old at most. She might have just left school and started her first job to do laundry for her aunt. However, she was already honest enough to admit that it was because of her fault that the laundry was damaged, rather than trying to wrangle, shirk, or delay. She was also brave and bore the responsibility by paying out of her pocket, and making excessive compensation before the person had made a request. She showed guilt and sorry for her mistake. In ancient times, anyone who did this, regardless of gender, would be praised. Therefore, Ling Pingan didn't think much about it and said to her, "Wait here." Then, he walked back to the counter, opened the drawer, and counted $500 bills from the stack of bills placed in the drawer. Then, he took the 5 bills and handed them to the little girl. He bought the clothes himself, so of course, he knew what the price was. In the market, the average price was about 30 to 40 yuan per piece. The brands of the clothes that the little girl sent over basically matched his clothes. Therefore, the 500 yuan was almost what she had spent buying the clothing. "What are you doing?" The little girl was scared out of her wits. She held the notes in her hand, not knowing what to do. "You went to university, right?" Ling Pingan asked. She nodded. "Then you should know the story of Zi Gong paid a ransom to rescue people and Zi Lu saving lives." Ling Pingan looked at her encouragingly. "Your behavior deserves praise." Besides, he looked at the little girl's attire. Just like him, she was only wearing some cheap casual clothes. Why would someone who works hard like him make it difficult for someone who was the same as him? "You've just started working, so your income must not be much," Ling Pingan said seriously. "How much money can you get in a month? If you pay for these clothes, I'm afraid you won't even have enough living expenditure this month, right?" Generally speaking, the wages of a laundry worker like this were low. At most, it was only 2,000 yuan a month. Although the federal hub had preferential policies, food, and rental subsidies for low-income people who had just graduated. The preferential policies only reduced income tax. The subsidies were just a drop in the bucket. The food coupons given out could only be used to buy cheap meat from Beizhou and Nanzhou, which were usually poultry. Who knew how the capitalists of the Beizhou and Nanzhou raised those chickens, ducks, and geese? In any case, there were problems with excessive antibiotics and hormones in large-scale intensive feeding. If a young girl were to eat junk food every day, there would be problems with her health. Ling Pingan could not control the way of living others choose. However, under his own eyes, it was difficult for him to watch a tragedy happen. That was also a common problem of web writers. The longer they wrote, the more books they read would make them more empathetic. Therefore, he was clearly in a state of affectioning himself. After thinking about it, he felt that he had to give this little girl a little reward and a certificate to commemorate what the schools would usually give students who were kind and helpful. Therefore, he reached into the drawer and took out a craft coin that he had received last night. He stuffed it into the little girl's hand. Although this coin may not be worth much, the workmanship is exquisite. I'll give it to you as a souvenir. And Xiao Xiao took the money in her hand and walked back to her office uneasily. She felt that she was very useless. She had failed in such a small task. Chief. And Xiao Xiao lowered her head and looked at Xia Ping, who was already waiting in her office. She felt ashamed. I didn't complete the task. Please punish me. In Xiao Xiao's understanding, she had taken on the task of giving clothes to a target. But now, although the target had accepted the clothes, he had given her money. Then that was not a giving anymore. She had failed the task. What happened? Unexpectedly, the chief was not angry. Instead, he asked with a pleasant expression, "Little An, tell me in detail," and Xiaoyu handed over the $500 bills in her hand and the item that seemed to be some ancient coin that the target had given her. Then, she told him everything that had happened that day. After that, she blamed herself. Chief, I don't know why, I couldn't refuse anything in front of young Master Ling, am I useless? No, the chief didn't blame her as she was expecting. Instead, he said happily, Little An, you've completed your task very well. I'm afraid no one can do it better than you. And Xiao Xiao looked up in disbelief and saw the chief placed the $500 bills on the table casually. He held the souvenir coin given by the owner of the bookstore and caressed it lovingly. It was as if it was a supreme treasure. Xia Ping had long investigated everything. The money spent by the target owning the bookstore, whether it was cash or mobile payments, was the same as ordinary money. There was nothing special about it. If there was something special, it would probably only be the rich spirit aura on the cash bills. However, the spirit aura on these banknotes would rapidly decrease and fade away as soon as they left the bookstore. It was not very meaningful and did not have much use. However, he looked at the coin in his hand. He could feel that this coin contained a rich spirit aura. It was definitely for some special purpose. Chapter 89. Endure. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 89. Endure. For the entire morning, Ling Pingan fought in the canyon. He was at the top and was successful in every move he played. The outstanding battle record and excellent operation naturally attracted some people's attention. He received private messages from teams of all sizes in his mailbox gradually. Without exception, they all invited him to go for a trial. However, Ling Pingan rejected all of them. In the end, he simply turned off the private messages. The reason was quite simple. Playing video games was a hobby. If a hobby became a job or a profession, then a hobby would become a bad thing. Moreover, becoming a professional was very tiring. Just look at those office workers. They worked from 9 to 5, day and night. There were even leaders watching over them. Once they made a mistake, they might be reprimanded. He lived his life happily. Why did he have to suffer the wrath of others for a few stinky money? Why did he have work under the mood of others? Tao Yuanming would not bow to the superior in order to get the scanty pay of rice. Ling Pingan would not suffer the wrath of others for money either. He was not short of money to spend. Ling Pingan put down his phone and brewed himself a cup of fragrant tea. Then, he gave a small cup to the kitten, Batet. The man and the kitten were drinking tea happily at the counter. I am not going to play games in the afternoon. Ling Pingan thought, I'll work on the new book. After deleting one beginning after another in the past 2 days, Ling Pingan was getting some idea. This time, he decided to write about the king's soldier of the city. Lu Ji raised his head and looked at his father. the current son of the Emperor of Xinghan, the guardian and protector of the Xinghan Temple. The representative of the Black Dragon Emperor was already old. More than 10 years ago, the kings with the same surname in the south started a rebellion under the instigation of the followers of Tsench. The tip of the spear pointed straight at Chang'an. In the end, the rebellion was wiped off by the cooperation of General Zhou Yafu and King Liang. However, the emperor suffered serious internal injuries from then on. Even he had won the battle with the brothers of the same surname, it was a Pyrrhic victory. That battle had shattered the main cards in the temple into few pieces. Xinghan's vitality had been greatly damaged. Some of these injuries had directly appeared on the emperor's body, causing him to suffer from a serious illness and reduce most of his lifespan. Ji. Although the old son of heaven's dragon blood was exhausted, he still had enough power. Although he was just lying there, the dragon might on his body still filled the palace. Father. Lu Ji knelt in front of his father's bed. I'm back. It's good that you're back. The old emperor looked at his heir affectionately. It's good that you're back. I just met your aunt. The old emperor sat up and held Lu Ji's hand. She's here to plead for mercy. Lu Ji showed an angry look, but he immediately lowered his eyes. I'll listen to your arrangements, father. The old emperor nodded in satisfaction. My son has grown up. He said to himself, my body will not be able to hold on for long. I will return to the temple and meet with the Gaozu and Taizong. The souls of the successive emperors of the Xinghan kingdom would enter the main temple after their deaths. They would continue to bless and protect the country, and at the critical moment, they could bend over the clothes that were worshipped in the temple and fight for the country. However, every time they showed their divinity, they would consume the vitality of the country and their souls. Therefore, unless it was necessary, the ancestors, generals, and ministers enshrined in the temple would not appear. The rebellion that happened more than 10 years ago had already damaged the vitality of the country seriously. Lu Ji understood what his father meant. Now, he needed to endure and lay low. At that time, the old emperor looked at his son, the future heir, and said, you still have to rely on your aunt. Letting her go to the Changle Palace and deal with the Empress Dowager. Then let the Empress Dowager support you. I understand. Lu Ji said calmly, everything is for the country and the world. That's good, the old emperor touched the crown on his son's head with great relief. He did not ask how Lu Ji escaped. Because he did not need to. The royal family of Xinghan had always been like this. They would not ask about the process, only the results. Walking out of his father's bedroom, a few Panda.men guards immediately followed. The Panda.men were the most trusted personal guards of the royal family in this land since ancient times. For thousands of years, they had also used their loyalty to prove their reliability. Just like last night when Lu Ji was assassinated, the 18 Panda.men guards protecting him had all died in battle. Your Highness, Lu Ji had just walked down the steps when a voice that made him feel nauseous came from behind him. He turned around and showed an extremely gentle and friendly smile. Zhang Huangmen. I haven't seen you for a long time. The person who came was the personal eunuch of his mother, the assistant minister of the Huangmen, Zhang Xian. BDNV he was a standard follower of Tsench. Starting from the ancestral dragon, these followers of Tsench were comfortable in the royal palace. Especially the concubines in the harem, they all trusted and relied on their ideas and plans. After all, there was no better place than the harem to play tricks and scheme. The concubine in the harem itself was a huge market. Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes and walked in front of Lu Ji. He knelt and kowtowed, saying, this servant pays respects to the crown prince again. Your Highness, he raised his head and said with a chuckle, Her Majesty the Empress ordered this servant to bring a servant to apologize to Your Highness. Your Highness, please do show due respect to Her Majesty the Empress and receive this servant mercifully. Listen to what this dog wants to say. It's not too late to get angry after that. Of course, Lu Ji knew who was coming. It must be the leader of the rat men who had assassinated him last night. These dirty rats had obtained a piece of territory in Guyuan by bribing the current Empress Dowager and Taizong's most favored concubines and obtaining Taizong's permission. Thus, these rats had always had a good relationship with the concubines of the imperial palace. Therefore, Lu Ji was not angry. He even smiled and said calmly, "Since it is the recommendation of Zhang Huangmen, then I am willing to listen." A moment later, an old rat man stumbled in front of Lu Ji. He knelt with a thud. This ignorant and vulgar rat man Asin from afar pays his respects to the honorable crowned prince of the Milky Way Empire, the future guardian and protector of the temple. As he spoke, he kowtowed with a thud. This lowly one is guilty. This rat man deserves to die. This lowly one has failed in teaching and discipline. I caused some ignorant, foolish, and audacious bastards to commit such a heinous crime like assassinating your highness under the instigation of others. This lowly one and all the rat men know that this is a deadly crime that cannot be forgiven even if they die for it 10,000 times, but without your highness's decision. This lowly one and all the rat men would not dare to take their own lives as to avoid tarnishing your highness' benevolence, so, I made my own decision. I've already killed those stupid dogs who were used and bewitched by others. As it spoke, someone brought boxes to Lu Ji. The boxes were opened, revealing the rat men's heads that had been slaughtered. Lu Ji listened to the words and then looked at those heads. The anger and dissatisfaction in his heart surged up like never before. He felt humiliated, offended, and belittled. But he hid these emotions very well. He even hoped that outsiders would understand him as someone careless and easily believed in others. After last night's events, the crown prince of Xinghan Kingdom had grown up. So, he smiled and personally went forward to help the old rat man up. I know the loyalty of the Aisin clan. Mother, aunt, and the Empress Dowager have told me more than once that the Aisin rat men have contributed to the country, so, old sir, you don't have to blame yourself, since these sinners are already dead. Let's close this matter. I will send someone to cancel the arrest and punishment of the Aisin clan. Thank you, your highness. The rat man's face was covered in tears as he immediately knelt and kowtowed again. Lu Ji helped him up again and comforted him. Old sir, don't worry so much. When you go back, tell the entire clan that I and the entire Xinghan Kingdom will not blame them. Tell them not to have any burdens and continue to serve the Xinghan society and the ancestral temple. That was a bitter fruit that he had to swallow. Lu Ji was clear that his current strength was not enough. He had to endure it. He could only endure it. But I won't endure your act for too long. He touched the handwritten notes of the ancestral dragon in his sleeve. He would immediately start to manufacture and produce the terracotta army according to the notes in the book. Once the number of the terracotta army reached a certain level, it would be time for him to take revenge. Not just on the rat men of the Aisin clan. Chapter 90. Peace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 90. Peace. Sigh. Ling Pingan sat at the counter and sighed. The document on the computer screen went back to empty again. The reason was quite simple. The soldier king of the city was indeed very good at acting cool. However, his habit of being a reasonable writer always made him involuntarily wanting to construct a world that seemed logical and self-consistent. Therefore, he could not continue writing after the beginning. Rubbing his temples, Ling Pingan looked up at the time. It was already 9 o'clock in the evening. Let's relax by watching some variety shows, he said. It just so happened that the variety show he had been looking forward to for a long time was about to start. He turned on the TV and switched to the tomato station. He concentrated on watching it. However, after watching it for at most an hour, he sighed and turned off the TV. To be honest, he was looking forward to it at the beginning. Especially when famous female stars in the entertainment industry appeared one after another, he was extremely excited. But as he watched, Ling Pingan realized that something was wrong. "I'm here to watch the beautiful stars sharp fight, sarcasm, all kinds of psychological warfare, subversion, to watch the show from the inside to the outside, your F***king showing me songs and dance. Idiot program team." He cursed. Idiot director. If he wanted to watch a song and dance talent show, why wouldn't he watch the younger and beautiful stars dance? At the end of the day, this program team's positioning of the show wasn't right. Thinking of this, Ling Pingan was stunned. "Yeah, the program team's positioning of the show isn't right," he thought. "Wasn't I doing the same? As a reasonable writer, if he had to go to the ends of the earth to write about the King of Soldiers, wouldn't he be making things difficult for himself? So I should write historical literature." Thinking of this, Ling Pingan became excited. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he was the material to write history. Because, he had many collections of books, whether it was the Qin and Han dynasties, the Wei, Jin, Tang, or Song dynasties. Moreover, he had the problem of being a reasonable writer, and he liked to be picky about details. But, the problem was, about which period should he write? After thinking about it, Ling Pingan finally chose the Northern Song dynasty. There was a reason for this. The Northern Song dynasty was suitable for smack talk, and it was also very suitable for copying poems and novels. The key was that the Northern Song dynasty was not too close to the present day. There were detailed historical records, but there was enough mystery for the public. The public was both familiar and unfamiliar with it. Of course, the most important thing was that the weakness of the Northern Song dynasty was a point at which everyone was concerned. So, there was enough room for expansion. That's it. Ling Pingan said happily. "I won't be opening the store for the next few days. Focus on preparing the references." Thus, he walked to the door and pulled down the shutter. Then, he threw himself into the task of preparing the references. In the outskirts of Jiangqing City, in the Federal Army base, Zhang Hui held the coin he had just received in his hand and carefully observed it. It was a coin made of an unknown material. But its appearance was similar to the half-tail coin of the Qin dynasty that had been dug out from the soil. They were both rounds with an empty square in the center. On both sides of the coin were small words. Half-tail. The only difference was that this coin contained a huge amount of energy. Even just holding it, Zhang Hui could feel the powerful psionic power slowly flowing within the coin. Without a doubt, this was a coin created by someone that was proficient in psionic power technology and was well versed in the rules of psionic power. And its style and structure were similar to the half-tail of the Qin dynasty. So, is it related to Mountly? Zhang Hui thought. Before the recovery of the spirit aura, Mountly was just an ordinary hill. It was only because of the burial of Qin Shi Huang, the terracotta warriors, and the underground palace that the Federal Empire had listed it as a national protection zone. But after the recovery of the spirit aura, when the spirit aura tides covered the world, Mountly slowly became strange and dangerous. Furthermore, as time passed, the situation on Mountly became more and more serious. In the end, the blackguards even recorded that there was an army of terracotta warriors patrolling Mountly. Some people even saw enormous bronze warriors roaming in the depths of Mountly. In the end, the blackguards' commander-in-chief personally entered Mountly to pacify and suppress all these abnormal movements temporarily. But Mountly was destined to recover after some time. Thinking of this, Zhang Hui picked up the phone and dialed a number. "This is Zhang Hui. Please connect me to the commander-in-chief. Soon, a familiar voice came from the other side of the phone. Zhang Hui immediately saluted and reported the coin he had received. Then, the commander-in-chief's orders came from the other side of the phone. Zhang Hui listened and nodded. He put down the phone, took the coin, and solemnly put it into his pocket. At this time, there was a knock on the door. Zhang Hui walked towards the door, opened it, and saw Situ He. "What's wrong?" Zhang Hui asked. "Just now, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs called," Situ He said. "The foreign ministers of the land of Qin requested to hold a meeting of the new foreign minister." Zhang Hui was stunned for a moment before he reacted. "It's the impact of Zen Master Fa Hai's battle, right? Yesterday, Zen Master Fa Hai had killed William, the werewolf duke, and subdued Hill, the headless duke under the watch of countless satellites and spies. That battle would naturally have a great impact on the countries in the land of Qin. It was known that the seventh duke of the land of Qin was the mischief of the countries of the land of Qin. Basically, all the countries of the land of Qin did not have the power to balance these strong beings. They could only feign civility and compromise with them. Therefore, in fact, during Zen Master Fa Hai's battle in the Malan Kingdom, the ones who were the happiest were not the Federal Empire, but the Kingdom of Fran and the other countries that had been suffering from it. The mischief that was stepping above their heads had finally died. The opportunity to be in charge had arrived. That was great. However, wanting to be the head of the place had never been an easy matter in the land of Qin. Back then, the Emperor of the Kingdom of Fran had spent his entire life, but he was still unable to be the head of the place. Let alone now. Therefore, the intentions of the countries in the land of Qin were not what they were showing. They had dragged in the Federal Empire into trouble, yet they wanted to trick the Federal Empire into helping them out. How was that possible? Zhang Hui did not even need to think, and he immediately said to Situ He, "Please tell the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that the blackguards are under the orders of the High Sect, reporting to the spirits of Taizun Taizong. For the past 200 years, the blackguards have only known how to protect the country and have been ordered to punish the bandits. Without the orders of the Emperor and the requests of the people, the blackguards would not interfere in the extraordinary internal affairs of other countries. From Taizu and Taizong onwards, the foreign policy of the Federation Empire was not to invade or interfere with other countries. To put it simply, it was only one thing: peace. As long as others did not provoke them, the people of the Federal would only want to settle down and earn money to support their families, develop their economy, popularize education, and improve their technology. Therefore, as the only superpower in the current world, be it their economy or their extraordinary strength, they were the top in the world. Ever since the War of Liberation of the Southern Yin and Shang, the Federal Empire had not taken the initiative to declare war towards the forces outside for 200 years. Military means and interference policies were always the last resort for the Federal Empire. That was something that outsiders could not understand. However, the people of the Federal felt at ease.